Welcome to the Tack and Pulse podcast, your place for sci-fi news, rumour and debate. And today I'm going to be asking, what original series episode will Star Trek Strange New Worlds remake next? I've got a pretty good idea, but let's get stuck into it.
Our tachyon pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.
So first of all, is it fair to say that Strange New Worlds Season 3 has remade a couple of episodes of the original series? They definitely straight up nicked the end of the Squire of Gothos and the Arena. I mean, they were virtually the same, so I don't think anybody can really argue that they didn't nick those endings. But there were 2 or 3 episodes that were very heavily inspired by those episodes. You know, the Squire of Gothos, very heavily inspired. The episode with Ortega and the Gorn on that planet, very heavily inspired. And I would actually say Hegemony Part 1 and 2 was very heavily inspired by The Best of Both Worlds. Again, completely stole the end. They've just all gone to sleep. They have this massively overpowered enemy that is about to take over the Federation, but thankfully, thanks to us, they needed nap time. I would actually also argue what happened to Ortega and what happened to Picard in those episodes obviously is different, but basically had the same result. Picard was obviously turned into Locutus. He got PTSD. That needed to be resolved in a later episode. Ortega was attacked. She got PTSD. That needed to be resolved in a later episode. So again, you see what I mean? It's parallel. There are parallels there. Now, I do think I know which classic episode of Star Trek the Original Series they're going to remake or reimagine next. And I think I know why. But are there a couple of other episodes that they could have a look at? Well, I actually think the Doomsday Machine is a possibility here. Now, it would be difficult to do a reimagined version of that because obviously the episode is about the Enterprise fighting that enemy. But they have hinted at it because Captain Decker was mentioned in the Arena remake. That was the ship they were going to go and rendezvous with for the vaccines, and that could have just been a little bit of an Easter egg, a nod, and probably most likely was, to be honest. But also it could be a little hint that they're going to do something with Doomsday. The Balance of Terror is another episode, a classic, that I think they could look at. There has been conflict between the Romulans already within this series in the end of Season 1, and you could argue maybe that had hints of that episode in it, but I actually think that sort of World War II submarine feel they could have another go at. So that is an episode I think they could touch on. The City on the Edge of Tomorrow is pretty much the last episode that I think they could touch on, but again, I think it would be a little bit more difficult because we've actually already seen the Forever Guardian in Discovery. That's how we lost Giorgio to Section 31. God, I still hate that movie. That is something that they could try to remake and to actually go through the doorway, actually have sort of something happen to one of the crew that makes them go insane and do it. Go back to World War II, you never know. We could also see something to do with the mirror universe, but that's done several times before, so it wouldn't be a surprise. But no, the episode I think they will redo is Amok Time. So that episode we got to see Pon farr for the first time. We got to learn a lot more about the Vulcans and how when they get jiggy, when they get really horny, they're a dangerous bunch. That they actually can die if they don't get laid. Now, dear God, I'm glad I'm not a Vulcan. It's more like a bee or, I don't know, something. That when they get lucky, they then die. It's very unlucky. So we got to learn a lot more about them. We also got to see a seriously violent side of them with Caliphie, where they basically, I'm not saying that right, and someone's going to get in the comments, but it's a fight to the death when 2 males have one potential suitor. They just fight until someone dies. Not always, but normally. And again, bit of a violent side of the Vulcans we don't get to see very often. So, is there another reason why I think this will happen? The big reason why I think it'll happen is because Spock is very, very different in the original series than the Spock we see now. The Spock we have now is trying to get in touch with his human side. He has said it multiple times, but also he behaves like that. The Spock that we see in later iterations of Spock, because you could argue this isn't really Spock, that actually Strange New Worlds is Kurtzman universe like Kelvin was, and is actually not Prime Universe, but they say it is, so we're going to have to run with that. But the Spock we see later is not getting jiggy with half of the crew and does not have a giggle and a laugh very often. So the Spock we see later is more in touch with his Vulcan side. Something has got to happen to this version of Spock to make him want to try to get in touch with his Vulcan side again. And maybe hide behind Vulcan logic? Maybe during Ponfar something happens that maybe a character dies. And that event, whatever it might be, I've got an idea, would make him want to pull away from his human side, pull away from the emotions that he no longer wants to handle, and hide under Vulcan logic, become emotionless more again. What could that be? Well, we know it's not Nurse Chapel that dies because we get to see her in the original series, but there is somebody else that Spock is very emotionally attached to. La'an. So, if La'an were to die because of something that happens during Ponfar, maybe that explains why Spock then wants to become emotionless again. That he wants to hide behind that Vulcan logic. Kind of makes sense to me. But there is a big problem with this idea. And we all know Strange New Worlds is not afraid of fudgery. They will fudge canon here and there to make things fit. But Ponfar is supposed to happen every 7 years. Now, I've looked at the math a little bit, and I think it's about 5 years. Now, Ponfar doesn't necessarily happen every 7 years. It is roughly that time period. So they could just say, well, he got horny. Okay, it's a bit late, but so be it. I would actually argue we should have seen this in season 1, but obviously we didn't. So I think they're going to do a bit of fudgery, as I say they like to do, and just say that this fits the timeline. Will he end up having a fight with Pike? Probably. And as I say, I think La'an is going to be throughout something of this. Maybe not what they're planning, but it makes sense to me. So guys, get into the comments and tell me what you think. Do you follow my logic? Would that make sense to you? And, I mean, compared to the other episodes I mentioned, is this the one that makes sense for them to do at some point? Maybe the finale of Season 4? Get into the comments and tell me exactly what you think. Also, I don't know if you've heard comments recently from Alonzo Maya and Akiva Goldsman actually saying that they promise Season 4 will be better than Season 3. Is that admission that Season 3 wasn't great? Is that interesting to you? Do you agree? Get into the comments and tell me exactly what you think. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell notification. It really helps us out and you'll never miss any of our new videos. Also, you can become a member of the channel and get to see a lot of these videos before everybody else. Go check that out. As always, please stay safe and I'll see you next time.
Our tachyon pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.